October 14, 1996. The sun had barely touched the horizon when the first scream cut through the pines. It came from the south edge of Grayson Hollow, a tiny town in northern Oregon, population barely 2,000. Most folks here live quiet, predictable lives. Farmers, retirees, and the occasional hunter passing through. That morning, Deputy Carl Benson was sipping his first cup of coffee at the station when the radio crackled. Unit 3, respond to Forest Lane, possible missing person, female, 72 years old. Benson grabbed his jacket and drove out toward the tree line. The call had come from Mary Willis. She was a neighbor to the missing woman, Helen Draper. Mary's voice on the phone had been shaky. She'd gone to check on Helen, only to find her front door wide open, the kettle still whistling on the stove. Inside, nothing was out of place, except Helen's purse was still on the kitchen counter, her glasses sitting neatly by the sink. And out back, there was a narrow path of trampled leaves leading straight into the woods. By noon, search teams were combing the pine forest. The canopy above was thick, letting in only broken shards of sunlight. Every step on the damp earth felt muffled, absorbed by the moss. They called her name again and again, but the forest swallowed every sound. It wasn't until late afternoon that a hunter, 50 yards off the main trail, spotted something pale among the ferns. Helen Draper lay face up, her eyes open wide, frozen in shock. One thin puncture wound directly over her heart. For a town like Grayson Hollow, murder wasn't just rare. It was unheard of. The sheriff's office brought in the state police. They interviewed everyone, but there were no footprints, no tire tracks, and no signs of a struggle. It looked almost surgical. 2 weeks passed, and people tried to tell themselves it was a random act, a drifter passing through. But then, November 1 SD. Harold Dean, 68, found dead on the east side of the forest. Same wound, same expression frozen on his face. And then, November 19 TH. Martha Ellis, 75, disappeared from her porch just before dusk. Her body found the next morning, half buried in pine needles. By Thanksgiving, fear had replaced small-town chatter. Elderly residents refused to leave their homes after dark. Local hunters started carrying sidearms on morning walks. Parents kept their kids away from the woods. But everyone knew it wasn't kids this killer wanted. The victims, every single one, were over 60. The state police gave the case a name, Operation Pine Silence. Detective Samuel Hart, a 30-year veteran from Portland, took the lead. Hart was quiet, methodical, and didn't waste words. He didn't believe in coincidences. And 3 murders in 5 weeks was no coincidence. Hart studied the files late into the night. Victims from different parts of town, different backgrounds. No overlap except their age and proximity to the forest. It wasn't until he pinned a large county map on his office wall and marked each crime scene that something unusual appeared. The bodies weren't scattered randomly. They formed a rough crescent shape all along the southern edge of the Grayson Pines, as if the killer was slowly moving along the forest border, town to town. In early December, Hart called a town hall meeting. The community center was packed, every chair taken, people standing in the back. Hart stepped to the front, cleared his throat. This is not a random killer. This is targeted, calculated, and whoever's doing this knows the woods better than anyone here. Murmurs spread across the room. Hart continued, "They are going after seniors, only seniors. We don't know why, but we do know this. If you live near the forest and you're over 60, you are at risk." That night, heavy snow began to fall over Grayson Hollow. The streets went quiet, the forest darker than ever. And somewhere, deep among the trees, a man named Soffin watched the lights of the town from a ridge, his breath slow, steady, his eyes fixed on one particular house. December in Grayson Hollow wasn't usually this cold. The wind cut straight through coats and scarves. The forest creaked under the weight of fresh snow. Every sound seemed sharper, carried farther. Detective Samuel Hart sat at his desk, a mug of coffee cooling by his elbow. In front of him were the coroner's report from all three victims. Helen Draper, puncture wound to the heart, no signs of restraint. Harold Dean, same wound, same angle. Martha Ellis, identical. No bruising, no defensive marks, no signs of a struggle in any of the scenes. It was as if the victims never saw it coming. Hart leaned back, eyes narrowing. One killer, one weapon. But what weapon? The coroner had been puzzled. The puncture was clean, narrow, not a knife, not a bullet, more like a sharpened steel rod. Outside, snow was falling harder. A knock at the door broke his focus. Photos. Grainy. Two elderly victims, eyes wide open, same frozen shock. The case notes were sparse, but there was one detail. Both victims had homes bordering dense forest, and both had been killed in early winter. Hart's mind began to spin. Could this be the same man? Had he been killing for decades, and no one connected it? If so, Soffin wasn't just some drifter. He was patient, deliberate, and had probably been here longer than anyone realized. 2 days later, the fourth victim appeared. December 15 th. Earl Thompson, 69, found behind his barn, snow drifting over his body. Same wound. But this time, there was something else. Hart knelt beside the body, brushing snow from Earl's coat, and there, barely visible in the frost, was a single pine needle, wedged inside the wound. It didn't belong there. It was too deliberate. Hart turned to Benson, his voice low. "He's sending us a message." Back at the station, Hart spread the case photos on the table. 4 murders now, each closer to the town center. And then a realization hit him. The crescent-shaped pattern. It wasn't random. If he plotted the murders on the map, the line of killings was slowly but surely circling inward, like a tightening noose. That night, Hart couldn't sleep. He kept seeing the victim's eyes, wide, frozen, not in terror, but surprise. And in his gut, he knew Soffin had watched each one, for days, maybe weeks, until the exact moment he struck. December 22, 3 days before Christmas, Grayson Hollow woke to news of the 5th victim. Agnes Merriweather, 81, taken from her living room while her TV was still on. The snow outside showed faint drag marks leading toward the woods. No footprints, just drag marks. By now, the town was suffocating in fear. Hart had to act. He ordered roadblocks, forest patrols, even called in a helicopter unit. But the dense pines swallowed everything, even heat signatures. It was as if the forest itself were protecting Soffin. On Christmas Eve, while most of the town stayed locked indoors, Soffin was out there, somewhere, moving silently through the trees. Watching, waiting, and Hart knew if they didn't catch him soon, the circle on that map would close. 25 December, Christmas morning. Most of Grayson Hollow was buried in snow. Houses shuttered, streets empty. Only the faint hum of a few generators broke the silence. Detective Hart stood in the middle of Pinewood Street, breath fogging in the cold. There had been no murder last night. No sign of Soffin. But Hart knew better. Soffin wasn't taking a holiday. He was watching. Hart's map, now with 5 red pins, sat in the front seat of his unmarked car. He'd traced the path again, from Helen Draper's house to Harold Dean's barn, to the frozen ditch where Earl Thompson was found. The arc was closing in. The center point, a narrow strip of forest, wedged between old Highway 19 and the abandoned rail tracks. Hart circled it in black ink. The next morning, Hart and Deputy Benson trekked into that section of woods, fresh snow muffling every step. No footprints, no tire tracks, just trees, thick, endless. They searched for 3 hours, found nothing. But as they were heading back, Hart noticed something. A tree with bark stripped in a perfect, vertical line. Fresh cuts, maybe a week old. He crouched down, saw a small notch carved at the base, almost like a marker. He looked up at Benson. This isn't random, his marking territory. Back in town, Hart pushed for more patrols, but manpower was thin. The sheriff's office had barely a dozen active officers, and half were tied up with weather emergencies. Hart decided he'd take the risk himself. Night after night, he parked on the edge of the forest, headlights off, engine cold, watching for movement. The woods looked still, but Hart could feel it. Something was moving out there. 29 December, snowstorm warning, winds hitting 30 miles an hour. Hart sat in his car, heater off, trying to stay awake. At 1:17 a.m., a flicker of light deep in the trees. Not a flashlight, not fire, a dull, steady glow. Hart grabbed his coat and went in. The forest was a maze. Branches whipped at his face. Snow crunched under his boots. The glow stayed just far enough ahead, pulling him deeper. And then it vanished. Hart stopped, heart pounding. The only sound was the wind. He turned to head back and froze. A shape standing between the trees. Tall, still, face hidden in shadow. Hart couldn't move. The figure tilted its head slowly, and then it stepped back, disappearing into the dark. By the time Hart reached his car, snow had already filled his tracks, and he knew that had been Soffin. 30 December, the 6th body appeared. Jonas McCree, 74, found sitting upright in his porch chair, eyes open, snow gathered on his shoulders. Same wound, but this time there were 2 pine needles placed on his lap. Hart stared at them for a long time. Soffin wasn't just killing now, he was talking. And whatever he was saying, it was meant for Hart. 31 December, the last day of the year. The snow had stopped, but the cold was worse than ever. Detective Hart sat in his office, sleeves rolled up, eyes locked on the map. 6 murders, all victims over 60, all within the tightening arc. The center still pointed to that narrow strip of forest. Hart's coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he didn't notice. He was reading through old missing person reports. Anyone who might match Soffin. And then he saw it. November 1983. Jonathan Soffin, 27, former butcher, disappeared after being questioned in connection with the death of an elderly neighbor. The report said there wasn't enough evidence to hold him. He'd vanished the next week. Hart stared at the grainy black and white booking photo. The same sharp jawline, the same dark eyes. If this was their man, he'd be 69 now, almost the same age as the people he hunted. Why? Why kill people his own age group? Hart couldn't answer that yet, but he knew one thing. Soffen wasn't just a killer. He was meticulous, patient, and for nearly 4 decades, he'd been perfect. Until now. The pine needles, the glow in the forest, the marks on the tree. Hart realized Soffen was slipping, leaving signs, maybe without meaning to, or maybe he wanted Hart to follow. Hart decided to set a trap. He picked a spot deep in the forest, where 3 old trails converged. Perfect visibility, but easy to hide nearby. On January 2, they placed a small hunting shack there, windows lit faintly from a battery lamp, a shadow mannequin sitting in the chair. From a distance, it looked like an old man, alone. Hart and Benson waited, hidden under heavy snow camo, breathing slow, every sound muffled. Hours passed, snow falling, melting, refreezing. Nothing. At 3:42 a.m., Benson nudged Hart. A shadow moving between the trees. Slow, deliberate. It stopped just outside the shack's glow. Hart's heart was pounding, every instinct screaming to move now, but Soffen didn't step forward. Instead, he knelt and touched the snow. He didn't even flinch. He turned and looked straight toward where Hart was hiding, like he'd known all along. Hart froze, finger on the trigger, and Soffen just smiled before slipping back into the forest. That smile haunted Hart for days. It wasn't the smile of a man who'd almost been caught. It was the smile of someone who had plans. 3 January, a week since the mannequin trap. No new bodies, no sightings, just silence. The kind of silence that makes you wonder if the danger's past. But Hart knew Soffen wasn't done. For January, freezing rain all night, coating the trees in glass. Hart was driving the back roads near the forest line, scanning for fresh tracks. That's when he saw it. An old pickup parked where the snow had been plowed only halfway. No plates, just mud-caked tires and a tarp covering the bed. Hart slowed down, looked closer. Under the tarp, something was dripping. He pulled over, stepped out, the wind cutting through his coat. The drip was thick, dark against the white snow. Blood. Hart ripped the tarp back. Underneath, a bundle of old blankets, and inside, a butcher's knife, handle worn smooth, still warm to the touch. It was the first real physical evidence in months. Hart looked around, but the road was empty. Whoever had left it was gone. Back at the station, they dusted for prints. Most of the knife was clean, wiped down, but near the base of the handle, a partial thumbprint. The lab matched it within hours to a hunting license application from 1978, named Jonathan Soffen. Hart finally had proof, and now he had a warrant. They knew Soffen's truck wouldn't be registered, but they also knew he had to refuel somewhere. There were only 3 gas stations in a 40-mile radius. Hart split the team, each man watching a different location. 9 January, 3:15 a.m. Deputy Benson's radio crackled. Gray Ford, no plates, pulling into Pinecrest gas. Hart hit the siren, snow spraying behind the tires. By the time he got there, Soffen was inside, paying cash, hood pulled low, but Hart could see his face. The second Soffen spotted him, he bolted. Hart gave chase, through the icy lot, past the pumps, into the tree line. Branches snapped, boots crunched, the beam of Hart's flashlight bouncing wildly. Soffen was fast, shockingly fast for his age. But the storm had made the ground slick. One wrong step, and Soffen's foot hit a patch of ice. He went down hard. Hart was on him in seconds, knee in his back, cuff snapping shut. Soffen didn't fight, didn't speak, just turned his head and smiled that same smile. Back at the station, they searched him. In his coat pocket, a single pine needle. Hart stared at it, knowing the case was over, but also that this was just the surface of the man he'd caught. In the interrogation room, Soffen finally spoke. "It's not over, Detective. You caught me, but the forest keeps its own secrets." And with that, he leaned back and closed his eyes. The murders had stopped. But for Hart, every time he drove past those woods, he could swear he saw a figure watching